The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome to another episode of Speaking with the Senator. Again, we're talking about the candidacy for CD2 here in New Hampshire, and we have our final contestant, if you will, or candidate joining us, Stewart Levenson, Dr. Stewart Levenson.
Oh, thank you.
Welcome back to welcome to the show.
Yeah.
Actually,
my pleasure to be here.
We've interviewed everybody, and you're the wrap up, if you will.
Okay, well.
So I'm glad that you could make the time to do this, and I appreciate you coming on the show. And I know you spoke with Representative Carl Seidel, and I represent District 12, so that is Nashua all the way up to Ringe, New Ipswich, Greenville, Mason, Brookline, Hollis. So you'll be speaking to a lot of those folks as well. Which
I have been. It's a good-sized geography.
It really is, yeah, and it's a lot of ground to cover.
I grew up in New York City, where a congressional district could be less than a mile long.
Yeah, well, the other ward in Nashua is pretty close to that, but maybe a couple miles. But I know that we have another candidate running there, and he's strictly Nashua. So you're a physician.
Yes.
And if you don't mind me phrasing it this way, part of your claim to fame is the fact that you were a whistleblower, and that took a lot of courage.
Well, I'm actually a physician executive. I've always seen patients, but administration is what I've been doing for the last 8 or 10 years. And yes, people talk about what it took to become a whistleblower. Mm-hmm. I never intended to be a whistleblower. I just wanted to make things right. I was overseeing the medicine departments within New England. I was overseeing 800 employees, 8 medical centers in 6 states. And so it's expected that a certain level of ethics will be followed, that people have a safe environment, patients are to be kept safe. Mm-hmm. We can't guarantee results, but we can guarantee our level of expertise that we employ. And the VA had never been a high-functioning organization. That's no surprise to anyone. But in my little world, I was able to make positive changes until I wasn't anymore. Mm-hmm. 3,000 patients were waiting to be seen under the Choice program, some of them for trivial matters, such as having their eyeglasses adjusted. Some were waiting to have treatment for their lung cancer. And those patients were all waiting several months.
Wow.
There were flies in the OR. There were unsterile instruments being used in ORs because of a mistake in the sterile processing stream.
As an administrator, did you have any kind of control over that?
Not directly, because I was in charge strictly of the medicine service. So in my world, where I did have control, that was unacceptable to me.
Right.
I wasn't the network director, I was the medicine service director, meaning the medical subspecialties. But when I did have something under my command, if you will, I made sure that change would happen until I could no longer do that, and that's why I went to Congresswoman Custer. First, I went to my own leadership, and they changed very rapidly. They started working on how to do cover-ups rather than fix things. We'd have morning meetings when an inspector was coming that week, which I actually was one of the people that anonymously initially called that inspector, mm-hmm. the Office of Medical Inspector, the Office of Inspector General. So they would finally decide to make an inspection, and the director in Manchester would call for a 7 a.m. meeting to talk about how we're going to put one over on the inspectors. And that was completely unacceptable to me. was able to get an appointment with Congresswoman Custer with a group of other doctors. Ironically, our attorney is a Democratic activist, so she had that way of getting word to the Congresswoman, and the meeting was totally unacceptable. The first words out of her mouth after we told her our story was that, oh, the Manchester VA is not in my congressional district. She's never denied that. She gives a different explanation now what she meant. She said, well, I meant you should have gone to Congressman Ginta, who was congressman in the first CD covering Manchester at the time. But no, she didn't want to be bothered, even though she is the ranking Democrat on the VA Oversight Committee. So if I were calling from Kansas, it would have been in her purview. So my next step was about a week of sleepless nights. I decided to go to the Boston Globe. I had a letter from a surgeon at New England Baptist that said he hadn't seen surgery this bad since doing pro bono work in rural Nigeria. So I contacted the editor of the Boston Globe. I knew they get all sorts of requests. And I said, I have a letter from this surgeon, and this is what he said about our surgery program. And within a day, I got an email back saying, do you actually have this letter? And I sent him a screenshot of it. And he was in my office the next week.
Wow.
And I understood fully. Whistleblowers, the vast majority of them, never work in their industry again. I'm fortunate. I have a medical degree. I'm in a shortage specialty. I'll always be able to put food on the table. But I won't always be able to look my colleagues in the eye if I didn't do what I had to do.
We were talking a little bit off camera about, we recently passed a bill. I was fortunate enough to be one of the co-sponsors. But it was being done through executive order about licensure of physicians for the VA. SB 488, basically, we recently passed, Governor signed. We actually went to the VA and had a ceremony. But I didn't understand, some of the gears to this situation. I mean, you saw it. You explained it to me off camera, where licensure, if a physician was licensed outside the state.
Well, VA physicians are functioning under federal law on federal reservations. So the VA rules are you only have to be licensed in a single state, and you can work anywhere within the VA system. I mean, granted, there's credentialing. Every medical center you go to, there are very high hurdles for credentialing, but you're not licensed necessarily in New Hampshire, which means you can't practice off-site in a New Hampshire facility. So at first, the executive order and later the law enabled doctors within the VA to get credentialed privileges at local New Hampshire medical centers, which greatly streamlined the delivery of care.
And so basically the veterans will definitely benefit from this.
Oh, no two ways about it.
Yeah.
There are plenty of checks and balances. The medical centers that do accept these physicians have their own credentialing system. These people have been vetted carefully, so it's not that you're enabling unqualified people, you're enabling people who have licensed in one state. Some of these people are licensed in Massachusetts, New York, where have you, states with very high hurdles for getting a medical license.
Right.
But because they're not licensed in New Hampshire, they can't work in a New Hampshire facility. So this changed that, and it was a win-win.
And it's hard to explain to some people, what we do up there, and I didn't see a whole lot of coverage on this, so it's nice.
It was too inside baseball for most people.
A lot of things are.
I know, which is unfortunate.
And it's hard to, when you're on the campaign trail, expressing to people some of the things that you're seeing, hearing, and that that can be a challenge, can it?
It's very difficult for complicated issues. They don't tell well in sound bites.
Right.
But fortunately, as a physician, a good part of my training is how to translate medical talk to the lay person, which is very beneficial because you owe it to your patient to discuss it in a level that they can understand.
Having never been in politics, now you're jumping right into a
deep end of the pool.
Really deep end of the pool with experienced, I believe Representative Custer was a lobbyist before, so she's well connected, if you will. And that's, Yeah, that's quite a challenge for you to just step in and say, "Oh, you know what? I'm gonna take on this giant."
Well, it doesn't scare me as much as maybe it should, but I do have experience running large organizations. Medicine is a tough field.
Sure.
And so I feel I'm a definite, at least level with her on a lot of issues.
And a lot of people are talking about the medical field.
It's a key issue.
It certainly is.
Look what the Democrats did to the U.S. health care under Obamacare. It was a one-party law, and they have to live with it. It's been horrific. It exchanged one group of uninsured patients for another, and we're now still living with it.
Right. And there's not enough money to pay for it.
No. Now they're, as if they haven't broken the bank already, they want Medicare for all.
Right.
That's been estimated to cost up to $38 trillion over a 10-year period.
I think Bernie Sanders is the one who's pushing that idea.
Oh, he's only one of them.
Yeah.
Even Jeanne Shaheen brought it up at one point to see if it would fly.
What are you hearing from your constituents?
They are,
or not constituents, but the people that could be your constituents.
They are tired of paying sky-high health care premiums, of paying for insurance they can't even afford to use.
Right. We have a study committee, actually I'll be in it tomorrow. It has to do with concierge services, and where people are actually, under the Obamacare, they weren't able to really keep their doctor. So,
or their insurance.
Or their insurance. And it didn't go down $2,500, it actually went up $2,500. And people that are senior age, people that are still working just to pay for their health care.
Everyone is working to pay for their health care.
It's
young families have to decide between having a mortgage, buying a house, or paying health insurance premiums.
For health insurance. And well, I promised one of my constituents that we would actually have a study committee to address the issue, because she's paying for her doctor, and that's not actually going to her deductible. No. Which I think is an enormous amount. And then after she meets that, if she meets that amount, it'll only be at 80%.
Yes.
And then there are people that are getting it for nothing. And it's just, it doesn't make sense to her. And she's working.
She's not the only one it doesn't make sense to. It doesn't make sense to anyone who's paying attention. If it makes sense to you, you're not paying attention.
You're not yeah.
I mean, look at Medicaid. I think that's one of the things you were referring to. Mm-hmm. That Medicaid is the true concierge service in this country, mm-hmm. and we need a safety net. There's no two ways about it. But the Medicaid system provides services for people that other people who are paying for it can't afford for themselves. Mm-hmm. When I was an ER doctor in New York City, this is 30 years ago, once the sun went down, we used to say the ER became the nighttime family practice Medicaid clinic. And we also said that if they put it, the volume would go down by 60% if we installed a turnstile that took quarters. It was that bad.
Wow.
People would come, and if you're nefarious and you want to make money in a Medicaid clinic, you open it up next to a shopping mall. The reason for that is, at the time, Medicaid paid for taxi cabs. So you wanted to go shopping that day, you just scheduled an appointment at the local Medicaid clinic. It didn't cost you a thing. You got your cab ride to the clinic, and there by the shopping mall, you did your shopping, you took your cab home. So the taxpayers were paying for it front, left, and center.
What's the answer?
Well, the answer is to revamp the Medicaid program. We are never going to have any form of workable health insurance or health care in this country without a safety net. It's just not in our makeup. So we need a Medicaid system that actually works. And what that's going to mean is, I believe, instead of a work requirement, which I think is a reasonable way to go, I don't have a problem with that, although it
was like pulling teeth to add that, by the way.
Yeah, well, I laud you for being able to do it. I just question whether you're actually going to get any real work out of anyone. But I'm afraid that you're going to need state employees doing real work to monitor the people that are doing less than real work. So I am concerned about that. But is it that much of a travesty for there to be copays indexed to somebody's level of poverty?
So have some skin in the game.
Yes. I mean, I don't go to my doctor for something trivial, and I'm sure you don't either, because you have a copay. You have co-insurance.
I'm too busy.
Yeah, you're too busy as well. Well,
I don't want to go there.
Exactly. which in some ways is unfortunate when it comes to preventive services. But nonetheless, there has to be something limiting you from just going back and forth to the shopping mall, if you will, for your health care. So having a copay or something like that, I feel, would be more effective than even a work requirement.
What are some of the other issues that you're hearing that are people are really concerned about?
Immigration reform. As a country, I started my campaign close to a year ago, and I said, immigration is a national fiasco, that we'll never control the opioid crisis, we'll never reach an agreement while we have porous borders. Now it's gone from a fiasco to a tragedy. We have the Molly Tibbetts that are murdered by criminal illegal immigrants. It's gotten worse, if anything. The drugs are coming under our borders through tunnels that I say have everything but a toll plaza. I mean, you've seen the pictures of these tunnels.
Yep.
They have lights, they have HVAC, you name it. And because the trucks are going both ways. So we have to build a wall. We have to prevent free access through our borders. And then we can control the opioids and who's coming into this country.
What would you do with sanctuary cities?
I'm still trying to understand a sanctuary city. I thought we were a country under the rule of law. And how a local government can decide they're not going to follow the law.
Would you withhold funding?
Oh, definitely. I would say the courts would probably get involved, but until they do, at least you can exert some control.
One of the issues that I've been hearing close to home, basically, is education choice. There seems to be a national movement towards education choice. What are your thoughts?
Well, there should be. New Hampshire is not Florida, is not one of other 49 states. Our basic autonomy consists of how you raise your children, and how you raise your children has to do with education. If you want to homeschool, if you want to send to a local public school, or if, gosh forbid, you want to use a private school. And we should have that choice. We've been denied that choice, in effect, for many years now by Washington, by the Department of Education, by a lot of people who feel they know what's best for us.
New Hampshire has some of the highest energy costs, and that is a real concern. We're part of a grid, and some people feel as though we're trapped, and we're basically servants to the other states around us because we actually export energy.
Yes.
And we seem to be gold plating the grid. And
well, gold conducts electricity very well.
Yeah,
I think we're finding
gold
that out.
is very expensive too, and we are talking tongue in cheek here.
Yes.
When I say gold plating, and there's a new wave of at least $4.6 billion worth of new upgrades coming our way, which New Hampshire is going to be paying a decent portion to that. What are your thoughts about the energy and about the grids and about the alternative energies or clean energy or dirty energy, whatever? What are your thoughts on this?
First, let's put things in perspective. New Hampshire is a net energy exporter. Mm-hmm. As expensive as energy is, most businesses, it's still a small part of their total expenses. But for the homeowner, that's where the difference really lies because you're not making profit off your energy. It's a net loss. So we have to control costs. One of the ways of doing it is encourage energy production within the state. The highest part of your energy bill is transmission costs.
It is.
So
You've been doing your homework. Good for you.
Yeah. So by having locally produced energy within the state of New Hampshire, it acts as a hedge against the volatility in the external market. Mm-hmm. I'm a firm believer that for the first time in history, renewables can compete on a level playing field. There's some people that say that nuclear is the cheapest form of energy, and they just don't get their facts straight because the regulatory environment, the technology, nuclear runs about the same cost as oil before all said and done, getting rid of the waste and what have you. And even though New Hampshire produces most of its energy by nuclear production, it's not enough, and it certainly won't carry us through this century unless something drastically changes. You see solar panels going up all over. There's a reason for that. Solar energy is now competitive. The break-even time is getting closer and closer. So there's a lot to be said for it.
Hydro's another.
Hydro's another, even wind, although wind,
There's some ups and downs with
Yes.
the wind, and the environmental impacts with
Yes.
with the wind.
I mean,
So
look at all the dead birds.
yeah,
at
and
the
we're
base.
hearing that a
Yes.
lot. So there's some definitely some things to consider with that. But here in Nashua, we have a hydro that you can generate up to 3 megawatts, which could take care of the
Yes.
municipalities. And if the schools could generate their own by just putting solars on top of their
Yes.
on the schools, that takes away the draw on the grid. But there
Exactly.
again, I did ask ISO if they could just, if, instead of gold plating the grid, maybe you could just silver plate it. Just we want reliability, but it's drowning us.
It truly is, and it's unfortunate. There are very few honest brokers in this business with energy, and we need to have an energy policy that serves New Hampshire.
One of the things we're going to be sending a letter to our federal delegation for. I'm chairing a committee right now on fish and game, and it's struggling. It's $2 million in a hole, and it is part of our infrastructure. We make sure that our firefighters are taken care of, our police department is taken care of, our state police, our bridges, our roads. People come to New Hampshire because they want to enjoy the forests.
Yes.
And part of the forests are part of the federal, our national forests. When somebody gets lost in the woods up at the White Mountains, our fishing game goes and takes care of them. Well, the taxpayers have to pay for that.
Well, actually, it's the people who buy hunting and fishing licenses who...
It's not enough.
I know.
It's not enough. And that's one of the areas. I mean, you can pay up to $60,000 just for one rescue.
Yes, and those laws to try to recoup it from individuals. I was speaking to Mr. Normando,
Yeah.
and he said he's yet to collect once.
Right. It's actually cost more money for them to go chase the money.
Yes.
So we're going to be sending a letter, and we're asking that the feds take up part of their portion, is at least taking care of the national forest search and rescue. And
Yeah, I find that very interesting how they want to scarf up our land by making it a federal reserve or preserve, but yet they don't want to pay for the natural upkeep of doing search and rescue.
Which we're glad to do because it is a nice draw. We love
Yes.
we love our state, but
Oh, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm an outdoorsman. I'm a sportsman.
Yeah.
But when I drive up to Umabog in northern New Hampshire, all of a sudden the rules change, and I can no longer hunt with the same ammunition.
Right.
When there's no biology behind there.
and the hunting licenses are basically decreased. So that's something
Yes.
for the future. If you get in, don't forget I mentioned that to you. New Hampshire needs some.
Oh, that will be very high on my list.
So gun issues. There's that's an important issue for a lot of New Hampshire citizens.
It's a very important issue for me as well as the people I want to represent.
Okay.
I'm a firearms enthusiast. I'm an avid hunter. I'm an avid target shooter. I teach hunter education. I'm a firearms instructor. So it's something that I care very deeply about.
Okay. So when somebody says a code word for reasonable gun laws, what are your thoughts about that?
Reasonable gun laws is like saying I'm going to charge you a reasonable fee. Gun control is the death of 1,000 scratches. The people who want to forward gun control, they believe that it will work in an incremental fashion. So you can pick a grape at a time from the bunch, and at the end there won't be any grapes on the bunch as easily as if you gobble down the whole bunch of grapes.
You got 3 minutes left in our conversation. What do you want to get across to the citizens of District 12?
Well, my district is the 2nd Congressional District.
I know,
which
but mine is 12.
But what I want to get
You're in
across,
my backyard, yeah.
Okay, is we can do better. We can solve a lot of our problems if our goal is to actually solve the problem and not be a tool of the lobbyists, work for special interests. I'm the only one running in my district who has a proven record of going up against the special interests and getting real results for the people of New Hampshire. And that's what we can do. That's what you want to do. That's what I want to do. And yet our efforts are often stymied by people like Ann Custer, who started out as a lobbyist. And as far as I'm concerned, she was better to the people of New Hampshire when she was a lobbyist and not a congresswoman. So that's what in my mind, we have to get across. The career politicians looking out for themselves are never going to be looking out for us.
How do people get in touch with you and look more into your campaign?
LevensonForCongress.com. Hopefully they can get in touch with us and see how they can help, because we want to help them. I have a wonderful career. I love medicine. I love what I do. I'm taking time away from medicine to hopefully become a congressman. I want to go to Washington, show them how it's done, so to speak. And I say within 6 years, the only way you'll see me is if you have rheumatoid arthritis.
Good. And all right. And you said you've got your website. And are there any events that's coming up that people should be aware of, that you're going to be at, that you want to let them know about?
Well, at this point, we're just getting out there, meeting voters. There's the WMUR debate Friday night, a few events here and there, which we decide basically on a daily basis. I've been eating a lot. I've been going to every diner in the district, which I hate to see what my cholesterol's doing, but we're just getting out there meeting folks. We were at Moose Festival 2 weeks ago. We were at the Lancaster Fair. I mean, I love New Hampshire. This time of the year, it's a wonderful place to be, just like it is the rest of the year.
Absolutely. Stuart, I really appreciate you coming
Thanks
on
for
the
having
show.
me.
And hopefully you've gleaned enough from all our candidates, and that they'll help you with your decision. Don't forget, we have a day to vote, and that is September 11th. We'd love you to show up and make your choice, and hopefully the show's been helping with that decision. So until next week, thanks for watching Speaking with the Senator.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.